Somewhere outside Phoenix, in the middle of the desert, there's a building the size of 10 football fields. No windows, almost no people, just the low, endless hum of 100,000 computer chips. And on the roof, steam, rising all day, all night. That steam used to be drinking water, millions of gallons of it every single day, pumped out of the ground, pushed through the building, and exhaled into the sky. Now gone. That building is what's keeping AI like ChatGPT and Google Gemini alive. And it is not alone. In 2025, AI data centers swallowed close to 1 trillion liters of water, 264 billion gallons, the annual water use of nearly 2 million Americans, evaporating at roughly the same daily rate as the entire global bottled water industry. The United Nations now projects that by 2030, data centers could consume over 9 trillion liters a year, enough to cover the basic water needs of all 1.3 billion people in sub-Saharan Africa, which raises an obvious question. It's AI. It's software. Why is it drinking anything at all? Today, 3 answers. 1, why AI physically needs water. 2, how much it's really using per building per year. And 3, the part the scary headlines always skip, why none of those numbers matter nearly as much as one thing, where the water comes from. Let's start with the machine itself. The heat problem. Here's the thing about AI that's easy to forget. It's not magic and it's not a cloud. It's physics. Every question you type gets routed to a data center, a warehouse sometimes the size of several football fields, packed with racks of specialized computer chips. And those chips have one defining characteristic that matters for this story. They run hot. An AI chip doing heavy work converts almost all of the electricity it consumes into heat. Thousands of them stacked together running around the clock turn a data center into what is essentially a giant space heater that never turns off. If you let that heat build up, the chips throttle, fail, or melt. So the single most important engineering problem in a data center, after getting enough electricity, is getting rid of heat constantly, forever. And it turns out one of the cheapest, most energy efficient ways humans have ever invented to get rid of heat is the same one your own body uses: evaporation, sweating. Many data centers use what's called evaporative cooling. Warm air or warm water from the server halls gets passed through cooling towers, where some of the water is deliberately allowed to evaporate. Evaporation absorbs an enormous amount of heat energy, so the remaining water comes out cooler, gets cycled back in, and the process repeats. It's elegant, it's efficient, and it consumes water because the evaporated portion doesn't go back into the pipe. It goes into the atmosphere. This is a crucial distinction: water withdrawal versus water consumption. If a facility pulls water from a river, uses it, and returns it, that's withdrawal. The water stays in the local system. But evaporated water is consumed. It's no longer available to that river, that aquifer, that town, and a single large data center can consume millions of gallons a day. This way, comparable to a town of 10 to 50,000 people. Now, could you cool a data center without evaporating water? Yes, you can use air cooling or closed-loop liquid systems, and we'll come back to those. But here's the catch: those alternatives generally use more electricity. And that leads us to AI's second, sneakier water, the water you can't see. When researchers calculate AI's water footprint, they don't just count the water inside the data center. They count 3 buckets. Bucket 1 is on-site cooling, the evaporative towers we just talked about. Bucket 2 is electricity, and this is the big one that almost nobody thinks about. Most power plants, coal, gas, nuclear, are fundamentally steam engines. They boil water to spin turbines, and then they need more water to cool that steam back down. So every kilowatt hour a data center pulls from the grid has a hidden water cost baked into it, depending on how that electricity was generated. In many regions, the water consumed at the power plant is actually larger than the water consumed at the data center itself. So when a data center saves water on site by switching to power-hungry air cooling, it may just be moving its water use upstream to the power plant. It's a water energy seesaw. Bucket 3 is manufacturing. Making the chips themselves requires ultra-pure water, enormous quantities of it, to rinse silicon wafers between fabrication steps. A single semiconductor fab can use millions of gallons a day. Add those 3 buckets together and you get the numbers behind the headlines. Researchers at UC Riverside, who published the first peer-reviewed estimate of AI's per query water footprint, calculated that a typical ChatGPT conversation consumes somewhere between 10 and 25 milliliters of water, once you include both cooling and electricity. Their widely quoted framing, every 20 to 50 queries adds up to about a standard half-liter bottle of water. 10 milliliters sounds like nothing. It's a couple of teaspoons, but now multiply it by billions of queries a day from hundreds of millions of users and layer on image generation and video generation, which are far more computationally intense, all those terrible memes and deep fakes. That's how you get to 1 trillion liters a year, a daily flow comparable to the entire global bottled water industry. Why location is everything. Okay, but here's where this story gets more complicated than the scary numbers suggest, and where I think the more honest, more interesting conversation lives. Because in the grand scheme of water use, data centers are actually not that big. Agriculture dwarfs them. Golf courses in America use hundreds of billions of gallons a year. Lawns use trillions. If you spread AI's water use evenly across the planet, it would barely register. The problem is, water doesn't work that way. Water is intensely local. A gallon evaporated in rainy Finland and a gallon evaporated in drought-stricken Arizona are, environmentally speaking, completely different gallons. And data centers don't get built where water is abundant. They get built where land is cheap, electricity is cheap, and tax breaks are generous, which in the United States often means the Southwest, Texas, Georgia, places that are hot, dry, and in many cases already fighting over water. Consider some real examples. In Newton County, Georgia, a single data center that opened in 2018 uses 500,000 gallons of water a day, about 10% of the entire county's consumption, every single day. And proposed facilities in the same county could use up to 6 million gallons a day, more than doubling what the whole county currently uses. In Texas, researchers estimate data centers consumed around 49 billion gallons in 2025, and that could grow to nearly 400 billion gallons by 2030. Google has disclosed that nearly a third of its freshwater withdrawals come from watersheds with medium or high water scarcity. And in 2025, roughly two-thirds of the United States was experiencing drought conditions. At the exact moment, tech companies were announcing the largest data center build-out in history. So the question isn't really, does AI use too much water in the abstract? The question is, who gets priority when $1 billion facility and a farming community are drinking from the same shrinking aquifer? That's not an engineering question, that's a political one. And it's made harder by a transparency problem. For years, most data center operators didn't even track their water use, let alone publish it. Companies have fought to keep consumption figures secret, sometimes citing them as trade secrets. As one UN-affiliated researcher put it, you cannot manage what companies do not disclose. It also means the public numbers, including some viral statistics you've probably seen, carry real uncertainty. At least one widely shared claim about a data center in Chile turned out to be off by a factor of 1,000 due to a unit error. The uncertainty cuts both ways. Some fears are overstated and some impacts are probably undercounted. Can this be fixed? Here's the somewhat hopeful part. This is a solvable engineering problem, and the solutions already exist. Closed-loop liquid cooling and direct-to-chip cooling circulate coolant right against the processors and lose almost nothing to evaporation. Some facilities run free air cooling, essentially opening the windows for 90% of the year, saving evaporative cooling for only the hottest days. Amazon says this approach let it reduce total water withdrawal in 2025, even while adding capacity. Google's most water-efficient data center in Texas used just 10,000 gallons in a year because it's air-cooled. Compare that to 1 billion gallons at its thirstiest site in Iowa. Operators can also use recycled or reclaimed water instead of drinking water, and both Google and Microsoft have pledged to become water positive by 2030, replenishing more water than they consume. Google says it's already replenishing about 2/3, but every one of those fixes involves trade-offs, usually more electricity, which means more cost, more emissions, and remember, more water at the power plant. There is no free lunch. There's only the question of which resource you'd rather spend and where. So, why does AI use so much water? Because intelligence, artificial or otherwise, runs on energy. Energy becomes heat, and evaporating water is the cheapest way we know to throw heat away. The cloud was never a cloud, it's concrete, silicon, copper, and water. The real story isn't that your chatbot question is draining a reservoir. One query is a few teaspoons. The real story is that we're building some of the thirstiest infrastructure in modern history at industrial speed, often in the driest places on the map, with less public disclosure than almost any industry its size. Whether that trade is worth it is a decision communities deserve to make with real numbers on the table. And right now, they mostly don't have them